We have discussed in the previous lecture how laws are made. As far as ordinary legislation is concerned, I taught you that it is enacted by Parliament, and we discussed the details of such enactment. Now, let us assume that Parliament enacts a law. Is that law applied? No. Parliament can make a law that can be in the cupboard for weeks, can never be applied. How is the law applied? It is always applied by the people and by the executive authority. So our lecture today will deal how does the people know about the law so they can comply with it, and how do the members of the executive authority know about the law so they can apply it and apply the sanctions, and how do the courts know that the law has been made, has been enacted by Parliament. So we are going to talk today about the implementation of legislation and its entry into force. Implementation of legislation means the applying of the legislation, and the applying of legislation means of it coming into force. What does coming into force means? When it starts to be applied. Does the law, ordinary legislation, be applied when it's acted by Parliament? Assume it's enacted by Parliament and they have not sent it to the President. Is it applied? And assume it is sent to the President but it's in his cover. Is it applied? What we're talking about today is what happens to the law after it's enacted by Parliament, for that law to be applied, which also means implemented, and to know when the law has to be applied, which is the date of the start of the application of the law. The application is twofold: the people complying with the law, and the members of the executive authority, the police and the courts, enforcing the law. And we're talking today about how do people know that the law has been passed, and how does the police and the courts and the members of the executive authority know that the law has been passed to start enforcing it. What is the first step in implementation of legislation? The first step is what we call proclamation, which is issuing the law, Isdar al-Qanun. Now let us think logically, my friends. Who really implements the law? It is the executive authority. And who is the head of the executive authority? It is the President. So it is the responsibility of the President to tell the people and the members of the executive authority that Parliament has enacted a law for that law to be applied. That is what we call proclamation, Isdar. What does really mean? It means that the President, in his capacity as the head of the executive authority, will promulgate the legislation, issue the legislation. The purpose of such issuance by the President is to declare that Parliament has made a law, a new legislation that everybody has to comply with. Number two, order all the civil servants that are members of the executive authority to enforce the law. Number three, declare to the people and to the members of the executive authority that a new law has been passed. Number four, order the publication of the law. Is the issuance of the law itself sufficient? No. People have to know about the law. So how do they know about it? We have a special newspaper called the Official Gazette, like Iran. And the President, when Parliament passes a law, he issues the law and orders its publication in the Official Gazette. What is the purpose of publication in the Official Gazette? Is, as we said, for people to know that the law has been passed, and something equally important, to know when that law has to be enforced. It is all, the purpose of proclamation is not only to indicate that the law has been passed, but also to indicate when said law will become enforceable. When do people need to start complying it, and when do the members of the executive authority and the police and the courts start complying with it. In the last slide, we discussed the proclamation of legislation, and we said that the president, as the head of the executive authority, should promulgate the legislation, which means should issue the legislation. How he does that, as we said, is he orders civil servants to apply it, he tells the people the law has been passed, and the only way for him to do that is by ordering the publication of that law in the official gazette. What do we need? What do we call the publication of the law in the official gazette? We call it the proclamation of legislation. What is its purpose? According to Article 5, according to our Constitution, people must know about a legislation when it comes into force. So, the President is obliged to publish, which is proclamation of legislation, for three purposes. Number one, it is only upon publication that a new legislation becomes applicable. Number two, how can I apply legislation on someone without at least enabling him to know about it in a fair way? It is unfair to apply the law if we have not made that law available for the people. Number three, justice, simple justice. How can I enforce a law without at least giving someone the chance, a fair chance to know about it? So proclamation really is about 2 points: people knowing about the law and people knowing when does the law start to be applied. Because it's unfair to apply on someone without first telling him that his law has been applied, and also telling him when do we expect that law to be enforceable, and when he should comply with it, and when do the members of the executive authority start enforcing it, and the police and the courts applying the penalty in it. We are going to discuss in this slide and the next slide too, when can someone say that he doesn't know about the law, and when, if he says that, he is not punished and the law is not applied to him. Article 225 of the Constitution requires that all new laws, orders the President that all new laws enacted by Parliament must be published in the official gazette within 15 days from their proclamation. So, when the President says law has been passed, he must publish it within 15 days. Now, when the law is published, is it applied on the day of publication? Who in the world would read the official gazette the day it comes out? So also Article 255 of the Constitution states that the law will come into force after 1 month from the following date of its publication, unless Parliament orders otherwise. So we have 2 steps. Under Article 255 of our Constitution, step number 1, the law must be published within 15 days from its proclamation by the President, which means the day he receives it. This is really from the day he received it from the President. Number two, if the law itself does not state a date when it comes into force, when it is applied, when people must follow it, when members of the executive authority has to apply it, it is applied after 1 month. So, if you see a law that does not state the date in the official gazette when it becomes enforceable, becomes applicable, must be complied with, then it is assumed it is 1 month. But Parliament can always reduce that period to any period. It can reduce the date of publication. It can reduce it to 1 week, 2 weeks. Can even reduce it to increase it to 1 year. Can increase it to 1 or 2 years, as has happened with the belt. Remember the car belt law, which was enforced in Egypt 2 years after the law was enacted. What does that mean really in practical terms? Is the law is applied after that period, and if you claim you are ignorant of the law, or that you do not know the law shall be applied to you. What does this mean? It means that no excuse of ignorance of the law will be accepted after the 1 month period that we spoke about, or any other shorter period decided by Parliament. Let us take a practical example. One, the law is published on the 15th of January. On the 16th of February, that law is applied on everyone. Can I come on the 1st of March and claim that the law should not be applied only because I did not know about it? The actual act of publication in the official gazette is the important point. Every one of us is supposed to know about what is published, about the laws that are published in the official gazette and comply with. So, what is the condition here for the law to be applied on you? The condition is it must be published in the official gazette. But is that logically the only condition? No, there are two conditions. That it is published in the official gazette and you have access to the official gazette. You can get the official gazette. What does that mean? For example, if a law is passed in the official gazette and it is distributed in Cairo, and you live in Cairo, although you did not look for it, you did not ask for it, but it was available should you have asked for it, in this case, the law is applied to you. After the period we spoke about of the 1 month. Let's take another example. The law is published by the government in the official gazette. It is distributed in Cairo, but we can't distribute it, for example, in Minya, because Minya is closed because of the epidemic, the corona epidemic. You know that certain areas are closed, nothing goes in, nothing comes out. There is a curfew. Assume as a result of a curfew and the coronavirus procedures in Minya, nothing is allowed to go in, nothing is allowed to come out, because papers like the official gazette can carry the coronavirus. And this continues for 3 months. Can I apply the law during the 3 months in Minya, although they had no access to the official gazette? That is not allowed. And I will talk about this clearly in the next slide. Let us start this slide by talking about what we talked about before. We talked about Article 255 of the Constitution that says the President has to publish the law within 15 days and the law will be applied after 1 month. And we said the official gazette is published in the official gazette. And we said there are two conditions. Condition number 1, that it's published, and condition number 2, that the person would have access to it, which means it would be sold or available in his area. These are two important conditions. Published within 15 days, 1 month passed after it, so it must be applied, and when it is published, you must have access to it. So let us go to the example we ended the last slide with. The law is published in the official gazette, available in Cairo. Before it was published by 1 day, Minya was closed. remains to be closed for 6 months because of the curfew, because of the coronavirus. No newspapers are allowed in, or no official gazette is allowed in because of the coronavirus, because it can transmit corona. What do we call this? We call it a force majeure. What is a force majeure in this case? It is people in a certain area not having the possibility to know about the law. Or people in a certain area, it is impossible for them to know about the law through its designated means under the law, which is of course the official gazette. The only way for you to know, the only official way that you must comply with is knowing about the law through the official gazette. And if the official gazette is published and not available in an area, we call it, it is an exception to the rule of ignorance. Exception to the principle of ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Let us focus again. What is the principle? Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. When is ignorance of the law not an excuse? If the law has been published in the official gazette and it is available in your area. Now, that is the meaning. So every law, you cannot claim ignorance of any law as long as that law was published in the official gazette and available in your area. Okay. So what happens if the law is published, but it was impossible for the public in a certain area to know about it? The example I gave you about many. Because the official gazette was not available in their area. What happened to this? This we call an exception. It is an excuse. If this happens, it is called force majeure and it is an excuse. What is the result of that excuse? The law is not applied on you until you have access to the official gazette. So for example, main principle, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So a guy from Minya, a guy commits a crime. Let's assume the crime of stealing a pen was not a crime and then it became a crime. It's a new crime. And it was published in the official gazette while Minya was under curfew and coronavirus and nobody had an access to the official gazette in Minya. During that time, let's assume it was 1 year, during that time, someone in Minya commits the crime of stealing a pen. And he's taken to court where they tell him, we must apply the law and we won't put you in jail. What is his defense? And they tell him, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. He tells them, no, ignorance of the law is not an excuse, but there is an exception in the case of force majeure. What is force majeure? It is the situation in which I have no access to the official gazette. No access, not because I did not go out that day, but because the official gazette was not available in my area. Was not made available by the government in my area. And what is the result of that? What is the result of the force majeure? The law is not applied on me. What are the best examples for force majeure? Earthquake. Assume there is an earthquake in an area. Of course, when there is an earthquake, the official gazette is not sent to that area, so that is a force majeure. Assume there is a flood. Assume there is civil disorder. Assume war. I think the best example of a force majeure is war. But must always remember, as long as the force majeure is there, the law is not applied. But when the force majeure ends, the law is applied. Assume a law was enacted during the period of war, and you were living in Sinai, and there was war in Sinai, and accordingly you had no access to the official gazette, or the government did not make the official gazette available for you in Sinai during the war. Now, after the war ends and the official gazette becomes available, then in that case the law starts to be applied.